welcome back to my channel. We will be starting chapter 2 on the raft. S.A. Bodeen, author of The Compound, and we are on chapter 2. That's where we left off last time. And I got this new thing. So I can record my videos on screen, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I'm using Google Slides to do this. So, let's begin. Starbucks was on the first floor of AJ's apartment building, and every morning I ran down and got myself a grande vanilla bean cappuccino. Before I went by the pool to read, I washed off the rest of the hyena. The turtle was faint orange, but the lady had said it would darken. And then I carefully dosed my new piercing and rubbing alcohol. The pool was lonely by myself, and I didn't stay as long as usual. Back in AJ's apartment, I watched the rest of the DVDs from the final season of Battlestar Galactica. We didn't get much television We didn't get much television on Midway, and I made up for it when I got to Honolulu. AJ had Netflix, and I usually went through an entire series or two during my visits. Maybe it was weird that I didn't get to watch television like other people, and I had to watch stuff long after it was on TV. But I also didn't have to wait from week to week to see what happened. On the other hand, watching an entire series over a few days could be a letdown. Being so immersed in the characters and the story, kind of sleeping and eating them, it was even harder to come to the end. No, it was done. The final episode had me in tears partway through, and I had to hit pause while I looked around for some Kleenex. Finally, I had to settle for a roll of toilet paper and use up a lot of it by the time the episode ended. I clicked off the television. My shoulders sagged and I sniffled and blew my nose again. I felt drained. I could always start the series over, meet Starbuck again for the first time, but decided not to. For lunch I had some ramen noodles and then walked down to Ala Moana Center. I've been visiting AJ in Honolulu since I was 8. So I knew my way around. After shopping for a while and scoring big on a pair of pink high-top chunk tailors, I headed back to the apartment, which was very quiet and empty. AJ had several seasons of Lost on DVD, so I put on the first episode. The plane crash was a little intense, and I couldn't stop watching until the episode was over. Instead of watching the next one, a nap sounded good. When I woke up, it was dark. I planned on running to McDonald's for dinner, but I didn't usually go out after dark by myself. But it was Honolulu. I knew it like the back of my hand, and McDonald's was barely 5 minutes away. The tropical evening was warm and windy, and tons of people were on the well-lighted streets. Still, my heart pounded a little as I crossed the avenue. I never realized that I did anything in Honolulu with someone, either AJ or my parents. Come to think of it, everything I did it with someone, even on Midway. When I was alone, people were never very far away. When I got my plain cheeseburger Happy Meal and headed back, bag in one hand, banana shake in the other, I wondered what, if anything, I had actually ever done on my own before. A dirty guy without a shirt leaned against the traffic light as I waited for it to change. With my peripheral vision, I could see him watching me, and I shuffled away a little bit, trying not to be too obvious. He yelled, "Lucy!" Light changed, and I stepped down into the crosswalk, walking fast. Just as I reached the other side, a hand grabbed a chunk of my cornrows and yanked. My feet went flying as I whipped it around. The dirty guy stood there holding my hair, looking like he could barely stand up. "Lucy!" My heart pounded as I tried to scream, yell, do something, anything to stop him, but all I could get out was, "I'm not Lucy. I told you to go home." He grabbed my cornrows tighter, forcing my head down so I could only look at the ground where my villainous shake had splattered white all over the sidewalk. "I told you to go home." I tried to move away, grab my hair back, something, but he had a tight hold and was wrapping it around his fist. I started to cry. "I'm not Lucy. Why wasn't anyone helping me?" Instead of letting go, he wrapped my hair even tighter, so I had to step closer and closer to him. He smelled like fried onions and something else that made me cringe, something gross. A male voice shouted, "Hey!" The guy let go and I stepped it back. Another guy started yelling at the first one and I ran. The sound of pounding footsteps close behind me. I sprinted all the way back to AJ's apartment crying. The security guard wasn't there and I didn't want to wait in the lobby where someone on the street, maybe the dirty guy, could see me, so I ran to the elevator, punched the 10. When I finally got to the apartment, my hand was so shaky I had to hold it with the other one to reach in my pocket for the key. It wasn't there. No, how had I lost it? Calm down. I took a deep breath and then felt again. My fingers closed around the smooth metal and I breathed a sign of relief. My hands were still shaking so hard I almost couldn't unlock the door. When I finally got in, I slammed the door, locked all 3 locks, and dropped to the floor breathless. My back against the door, I hugged my knees and sobbed it. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. No way was I staying there by myself. Despite my intentional excitement at being on my own, being free, I was done. I didn't want to be on my own. I wasn't ready to be on my own. More than willing to go back on Midway to be with my parents, I swiped my face and found my little calendar book from my bag. Running my finger down the dates, it was clear I'd missed the passenger flight that went every other week. But the monthly supply flight left the next evening. Only one flight did those 3 trips to Midway a month. An aging Gulfstream turboprop. Unlike regular airline flights, the flights to Midway on the G1 were pretty middle. No security lines, no wait to check in. Don't worry about getting bumped. If you were a Midway resident, you could pretty much decide an hour beforehand that you wanted to go. Just show up with a passport and they'd let you get on. And they'd get you on. I took a few deep breaths, just so my parents wouldn't be able to tell how upset I was. Then I picked up the phone and dialed. I waited for the click, then the pause, then the ring. I envisioned our heavy old-fashioned black curly corded phone sitting on the counter just outside the kitchen. Could even hear the loud ring, but there was nothing. I hung up and dialed again, waited, nothing. Periodically, along with the internet, the phone lines on Midway crapped it out. They were all dependent on the satellites, and the wiring on the island was old, so it wasn't a surprise. Still, I wanted to talk to my parents, have them arrange the flight for me. Should I call AJ? I shook my head, answering my own question. She would just freak out and feel guilty about leaving me alone. Not to mention maybe get mad at me for not telling her Bobby wouldn't be checking on me after all. Figuring I'd call Mom and Dad in the morning, I brushed my teeth and put on my pajamas. My room was down the hall from the bathroom, usually no big deal, but I always had to pee in the middle of the night, and tonight I didn't want to go walking around when it was dark, and no one was there but me. So I went into AJ's room, which had an attached bathroom, and I locked her door, tossed all her blue and green shams and decorative pillows on the floor, and crawled under the covers. The sheets were cool and I stretched out my toes. Then I reached over to turn off the bedside lamp, but I couldn't. I did not want it to be dark, so I left it on and rolled over, facing the other way toward the sliding glass doors that went out to the balcony. The white curtains were shut. Pushing the covers back, I slipped out of bed and tiptoed over to them. Reaching out a hand, I grasped the edge of the curtain. 1, 2, 3. I whipped them back, gasping. Except for a few plant pots, the balcony was empty, and we were on the 10th floor. Nobody was going to crawl up. Don't be a baby. I let the curtain drop. Still, I was relieved. I'd check. I crawled back into bed, but I couldn't sleep. Without my aunt, my favorite place in the world has turned into something else. I heard a noise, a tapping. It's just someone knocking on the apartment next door. The tapping continued. It's just something loose, blowing in the wind. Tap, tap, tap. It's the ice maker It's the ice maker. Something is just loose. But I knew it wasn't true. I knew it was the weird guy from the street trying to get in, trying to get me. I pulled the covers up over my head and trembled, my heart beating so hard I was almost able to hear it in the quiet room. Now and then I peeked over the covers at the glowing red numbers of the bedside alarm clock, which shifted slowly throughout the night. 11:13, 1:02, 3:29. I waited, ready for whoever might come in to get me. 4:43. Finally, just as it began to lighten outside, I fell asleep. Chapter 4. AJ called at about 9 and woke me up. She asked how I was. I lied, told her everything was fine, and Bobby had stopped in the day before. I felt bad, but what did it matter when I was heading home anyway? Then I tried my parents, but the phones still weren't working. Then I stepped in the elevator to head down to Starbucks, my heart pounding until I reached the lobby. The security guard, who always smiled and called out, "Aloha!" wasn't at his post. Back upstairs, I packed, then went to the pool for a while, made a ham sandwich for lunch, and took a nap. About 4, I got dressed. The drive to the airport and waiting around there would be hot, but the plane would be chilly, so I had my standard outfit for flying. Karaki Bermuda shorts, a white camisole, and my green hoodie. I wore white flip-flops but shoved a pair of socks in my bag. I debated adding my new Converse, but put them in my suitcase instead. Then I called a taxi. As usual, the loading of the G1 at OAHU Air Services was pure chaos. People hauling boxes and cartoons and barrels out of the plane. I left my bags by the door to the waiting lounge and went looking for the woman who usually organized the loading. I didn't see her anywhere. A tall, blonde guy held a clipboard, so I asked, "Where's Suzanne?" Sick. She shook her head. Of all days. The Costco order didn't get delivered, and there's a new co-pilot. He waved at a couple of guys loading the plane. "Hey," he headed off, leaving me standing there. The pilot, Larry, came around the plane wearing black pants and a short-sleeved white button-down shirt with gold pilot epaulettes on his shoulders. Tall with dark hair that never had a strand out of place. He swaggered a bit. I waved. His shoulder wrinkled for a moment, and I called out, "Hi, Larry." "Robbie?" A slow smile spread across his face. "I didn't even recognize you. Nice hair." "Thanks. I'm trying to catch a flight home." He nodded. "We'll be stuffed, but there's always room for you." "I didn't see Suzanne." He scratched his head. "Yeah, she's gone today. It's a mess, especially with communications down at Midway. My new co-pilot is around here somewhere, trying to make sense of it all. Max, he'll get you on the manifest. Why don't you wait inside where it's cool? I'll come get you." The waiting lounge inside Oahu Air Services was air-conditioned, and I dropped my bags and then plopped down on the couch. There was a little fridge near the seating area, and I pulled out of a Coke and then grabbed a handful of chocolate-covered macadamia nuts from the koa wood bowl on the table. A golf match blared from the television mounted high on the walls, but there wasn't a remote remote to change the channel, so I flipped through Glamour magazine for a while. The flight was supposed to be wheels up around 5, putting us on the floor at midway about 11 or so. During nesting season for the albatross, the midway runway had hundreds of thousands of birds crossings a day. Potential disaster if a jet engine sucked one in, or even if the JI collided with a bird. Albatross weigh about 15 pounds. They're like a flying cannonball with feathers. So flights could only land and take off there at night, when the birds were less active. I never really got used to flying all the way over water at night. I wasn't scared because I'd been flying since I was little, but I still tried my best not to think about it. Knowing Larry and trusting him helped a lot. I'd taken the G1 back and forth to Midway probably 50 or so times. Probably 20 or so times, most of those at night. Larry could probably fly the route blindfolded. I waited for them to come and tell me to get weighed. The G1 could only hold 3,800 pounds of cargo and people, because that's how much it could still fly if one engine went out. Since we got a supply flight only once a month, and that was all the mail, groceries, parts they needed for the generator and other equipment, it meant we did without a lot that was simply too heavy. Like milk. A gallon of milk weighed 8 pounds. And milk for 50 people added up too fast. Thinking about it, I fell asleep on the couch. Larry shook me up. We're ready to go. Then he asked me something about Max and weighing in and paperwork or something. So groggy, I just nodded. My watch said 9, which meant we were getting a late start. He carried my big bag. I took my small one in my backpack. I climbed up the short flight of steps and ducked my head as I stepped aboard. All 9 rows of the red upholstered seats were chock full of boxes and cargo, except for 2 seats halfway back. 2 next to the starboard exit. The new co-pilot was already up in the cockpit. Max looked about 25 or so, I couldn't tell, younger than AJ anyway. His dark hair was very short, like in the military, and he wore the same black pants and white shirt as Larry. Only he also sported a black tie. Max glanced my way and didn't say anything. I smiled. Hi. For a millisecond he nodded and smiled, but his eyes didn't. They seemed sad. My dad was tall and always had to stoop to avoid the ceiling, but I could walk normally. Albeit sideways through the narrow cabin back to the fifth row of seats. The bin above my head was filled with a blue mesh bag of Satsuma oranges, my favorite. I noticed a sharp-eyed Michelle on the label and grinned. Part of Mom's grocery order. I undid the top of the bag, pulled out 2 oranges, and then folded the bag and slammed the bin shut. The bin across the way was also stuffed in, so I just put my bag in the seat next to mine. Then I sat down and buckled up. Although Larry had said it numerous times, he gave me the emergency safety spiel, pointing out the exit, the compound that held the emergency raft, the flotation device under my seat. He came across a little cocky, but I'd rather have an assured, ultra-confident pilot than an insecure one. As always, I listened, but hardly. I've heard it all before. Larry went back to the cockpit and put on his headphones. Not long after that, the propeller started to turn and air rushed out of the vent above my head. Sweat trickled down the side of my face, so I twisted the knob open all the way and held my face upward, smiling into the cool blast of air. Soon the propellers buzzed and the plane moved forward, lining up for takeoff. I looked out the window. A United Airlines jet trembled as it lifted, probably heading towards the mainland. A few minutes later, Larry's voice came out over the intercom. "Here we go!" My knuckles weren't white as I grasped the seat, but my grip would definitely pass it as tight. I wasn't usually this nervous, but I had just watched the plane crash on Lost and was trying hard to put it out of my mind. The engines motored up to a full throttle as we stayed there, so it felt as if we were a dog on a leash raring to go as someone held us back. My eyes went to the spinning propeller already going so fast it was invisible. Then to the words Rose Price on the engine. Larry once told me that Rose Price propellers went counterclockwise. Good Jeopardy question. I leaned my head back on the seat as the G1 surged forward, rocketing down the tarmac until we gained enough speed. The front wheels lifted and we were airborne. Lights below us, the steady drone of the engines loud. Out the window I saw lights from ships in Pearl Harbor, then ships farther out until they slipped away from my view, leaving only darkness beneath. The G1 flew steadily up until it leveled out and I relaxed to the familiar drone of the engines. Home was only a few hours away. Releasing my grip on the seat, I took off my flip-flops, put on my socks, and got comfortable. Still wiped out, I fell asleep. When I woke up, my watch said 1 a.m. Lights glowed in the cockpit, but except for the small lighted track along the floor and the gallery light. The cabin was dark. The ride was a little turbulent, but I'd been through a lot worse on other flights, especially a rough one that had led my mom to say to Larry upon landing, "Earned your money today, huh?" He had shrugged, but then said he didn't think it was a rough flight at all. Since then, I'd read that turbulence didn't ever cause a planned catch, so bumps didn't really bother me. 5 rows up, Larry sat in the cockpit and Max stood in the gallery sipping from a styrofoam cup of coffee. Not as tall as Larry, Max was thinner, rather wiry and athletic looking. Max went up to the cockpit and Larry stood up. He got a cup of coffee, noticed I was awake, and came my way. There's a storm front that moved in a little quicker than we expected. We're going to skid to the north a bit, but it shouldn't slow us down too much. Okay. Help yourself. He lifted his coffee and went back up to front. Despite the late hour, my stomach grumbled and I unbuckled and went to the gallery. A drawer held ice and drinks, and I grabbed a pink can of guava juice before rummaging through a big blue plastic cooler of sandwiches, full of sandwiches. I chose a thick turkey one, and went back to my seat. Unlatching the tray in front of me, I disconnected my sandwich, taking up the tomato, lettuce, and white cheese before replacing the top of the onion roll. At my first bite, the plane shuddered and bumped below me, and an especially large lurch shoved my stomach up into my throat. Larry's steady voice came over the intercom. "Robbie, make sure you're buckled in tight. It might get rough for a little bit here. We'll be out of it soon." I wrapped up the sandwich, saving it for when the turbulence calmed down. Maybe bumps didn't bother me, but I didn't really like eating during them. As far as I could tell, as far as I can tell, we were only as far as I can tell, we were only about an hour and a half from home. The ride got rougher and rougher, so that my knuckles were white as I held on and wished for Midway. Out the window were occasional flashes of lightning, but they didn't illuminate anything except for the rain pelting my window. Constantly lurching in the dark, it was as if we were in a car sliding on ice. Leaning out in the uh, I, aisle, I tried to watch the pilots in the cockpit, see if they looked especially concerned, but their backs were to me and their hands just looked busy. Larry hadn't announced anything for a while. I seriously wanted to call up to him, ask when we'd be landing, but it seemed stupid. We'll get there, when we get there. Grow up. Then the sound of the engines got louder. I try not to think about the dark and the water beneath us. Nothing but dark and all that freaking water. Chapter 5. 10 minutes later, although I wouldn't have believed it possible, the turbulence got worse. Now it felt as if we were in a slow globe that someone just shook and shook and shook. The lurchings turned into deep plunges that made me feel like we were nose diving before we finally came up, all the while bumping. One huge thump sent all the action Macs tumbling down, where they swayed from side to side. Mine swung right in front of my face. Oh my god! Was I supposed to put it on? A glance up front showed neither Larry nor Max had donned a mask. I couldn't very well ignore mine, so I tied a big loop in it just to get the thing out of my face. Another huge bump popped open a few of the overhead bins. All of a sudden, a quick barrage of soft but forceful punches pummeled my head and shoulders, but the assault was over before I could even shriek or fend them off. Origins from the bin above my head. One landed in my lap, the others lay all around me, rolling up and down the aisle with every shift of the plane. I wanted to scream but held it in. Panicking wouldn't help anyone, especially not the pilots. Again, I tried to see what they were doing, their demeanor, their attitude. Weren't they worried? Struggling with the controls? It was impossible to tell from my vantage point. I felt an overwhelming need for assurance, for someone to tell me everything would be okay, that I would be okay, but no one did. As we bounced around, tears started sliding down my face. I stopped myself and wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. You baby. There was no need to cry over a little turbulence. Tons of things are worse than this. And then there was a hush, not totally quiet, but there was just less of a drone than there had been. I leaned over and peered out the window at the starboard engine. At the end of the wing, a blue light twinkled. Usually the propellers were nearly invisible in flight because they were turning so rapidly, but as lightning flashed, I could easily see the propellers circling slowly, turning only with the movement of the plane. That engine had stopped it. Chapter 6. Both trembling hands covered my mouth as I stifled a cry or a scream, or whatever was making its way up. 2 words whispered their way out. Oh God. I wanted my mom or my dad or AJ or someone. I didn't want to be on that plane. There was only one way to know the seriousness of the situation. I would have to watch the cockpit, see what they were doing. Wiping my eyes on my sleeve, I prayed, God, please, please, please let everything be okay. Please don't let us crash, and please just let me get to Midway. And please let them be calm when I look up there. I leaned out the aisle. From the back, the 2 pilots looked to be doing what they always did, sitting tight, focusing on the controls. The loss of an engine had to freak them out too, right? Maybe I'd imagine it. I didn't know anything about planes, did I? Maybe the engine was fire. Maybe the engine was fine. Again, I stared out the window at the propeller, definitely not turning, and India could see that the woes and ice had quit. But if Larry wasn't announcing anything about the engine, what else wasn't he telling me? Or wasn't it not that big of a deal? Airplanes lose engines all the time, right? I knew I heard that somewhere. That's why they load only 3,800 pounds on the G1 so that one engine can still fly the plane. Only a few months ago, my dad was on a flight when the G1 had lost an engine an hour after leaving Honolulu, and they just turned around, no problem. After all, pilots are trained for bad stuff to happen, and maybe this wasn't even that bad. Maybe we're so close to Midway that they were already starting to think about landing. But why worry me with details about a stupid engine? That had to be it. We bounced again hard. Beneath my butt, something in the frame of my sink gave way. My eyes squeaked shut. Someone tell me it's going to be okay, please. How long can the plane handle getting beat to death like this? The engine was probably the first thing to go, then a wind or a tail or some other vital thing that we need to land. Larry just didn't want to share the bad news. I opened my eyes again and watched for some movement from the cockpit. Max got up, bracing himself against the sides. He managed to make it as far as the gallery. Was he getting more coffee? Things couldn't be that bad if he was getting more coffee. But no, he wasn't getting coffee. From underneath the bottom of the gallery shelves, he pulled something out and tossed it down the aisle in front of him. The cabin was so dark, but I couldn't see what it was. With a foot, he pushed it along as he walked until he reached me. Now I wanted to scream. It was a yellow raft, an emergency raft. But we would only need that if Max reached out beneath a seat. He yanked out a flotation device and shoved it in my lap. Then he uttered the first words I'd ever heard him speak. These words weren't "everything is okay" or "you're going to be okay" or "we'll be landing at Midway soon." Instead, they were the worst words I've ever heard. We lost an engine and the height gorillas are acting up. We can't get out of the storm. So Larry's going to ditch the plane into while he can still control it. He nodded at the flotation device in my lap. Put that on. Okay, people, I'm gonna take a break for a little bit. We're on chapter 7. So yeah. I'm gonna take a little break. So far, it looks good. It's about a girl named Robbie, and suddenly she gets on a plane. She doesn't realize that the weight of the plane is actually too much for the G1 to carry, and she doesn't realize that because by the time Larry said something to her, she was sleepy, remember? And she couldn't hear him, so yeah, and Max is someone who protects her. Max seems like a good person in his 20s. This book is it's a teenager book. So I really like the author. I'm gonna try to read more books by her. So yeah. Anyways, this is bye. Thank you for watching this. Hopefully I can upload this in time. I'll be uploading more videos today, and tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Soon I will be on vacation in August, so hope you guys enjoy these videos, and watch more videos on YouTube. Well, remember I have a website on Wix.com. Some people can find it, some people cannot. That's okay. You don't have to look at that. All my videos will be posted on YouTube, so you don't have to watch any of those. Anyways, this is bye. Thank you for watching The Raft by Thank you for watching The Raft by S.A. Bodeen, read by Haley Romero. I will be back. Bye.